kind of parlayed all of that energy.
Who was good and who wasn't? Who was lying
Industry
and who wasn't?
around the industry might not be for me reporting.
Whispering in my ear, I have an excellent guest for you, Caldwell. Good evening. I'm Earl Caldwell, and welcome. On a spring night in 2009, there was a young woman, a wonderfully talented young woman, came down from New York City. She had just launched her career as a filmmaker, and she brought a film with her that night, a prize-winning portrait of the legendary Shirley Chisholm and her historic run for president in 1972. That young woman was Shola Lynch. She's back tonight. She has another film, and I would say what I tried to say before. She is not only wonderful, she is a wonderfully talented young woman. So let us give her a Hampton welcome.
Thank you.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you back.
I'm happy. Anytime you call,
Ah.
I'm coming.
Well, congratulations on your new film.
Thank you.
And people I know say that out in Hollywood, where they give these Academy Awards, that your film is in the buzz for the documentary.
Well, yes, Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, about Angela Davis. It's been talked about. IndieWire, Hollywood Reporter has been mentioning it in the trades, along with other films, you know.
Yeah.
But to be in the conversation around the Oscars, not so bad. Not so bad.
Well, let us before we get deep into the conversation, let's take a brief look at some of the video from the film.
Okay, thank you.
Philosophy professor Angela Davis admitted that she is a member of the Communist Party.
Who put her on the top 10? Everybody had a file on her.
Her first lecture drew 2,000 students.
Angela's education is now being put into practice.
Angela Davis purchased 4 guns.
There is a conspiracy in the land. It's a conspiracy to wipe out the black community as a whole.
Well, I think she's trying to overthrow our system of government, and she admits that.
The actions of the FBI in apprehending Angela Davis, a rather remarkable story.
A U.S. District Court judge set bail at $100,000.
She knows that the movement to free all political prisoners is growing every day.
This entire incident was a deliberate provocation.
They wanted to break me. They wanted me to respond.
There was enormous feeling for Angela everywhere in the world.
We know that she is innocent.
We want to tell that Pharaoh in Washington to let Angela Davis go free.
What they're doing to her is an exaggerated form of what happens every day to black people in this country.
What does it mean to be a criminal in this society?
They are not going to kill her. They're not going to imprison her. We're going to free her. We're going to win her freedom.
That was the trailer. That was the trailer you saw.
Yes, yes. I'm tempted to say, what was it that drew you to Angela? But I mean, there's so much there, but for you on your...
You know, we know her face, we know her image, we know her afro. We don't know who she is. We don't know her story.
Right.
And it was one of these things where I just was attracted to finding out more about that story. And when I dug a little bit deeper, I found it was, and indeed it is, a political crime drama with a love story at the center.
Okay.
And as a documentary filmmaker, you don't get that many really super juicy narrative chances to tell that kind of story.
Right.
And so I said, okay, I want to find out what happened.
It's because she was such a political figure and controversial. I know they tried to run her out of the University of California.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to raise the wherewithal to present a film on her?
Oh yeah, you know, for me, I had worn an Angela Davis t-shirt back in my day in college, back in the day. Yeah. And so I thought, you know, it'll be easy to raise the money because people know her name, they know her image. But she was a she is a former communist,
right.
and she was on the FBI's most wanted list.
Right.
And so that was still very alive for people, especially funders. So she was still considered scary.
Right, right.
And most people assumed she was guilty, even though in fact she was acquitted.
Right. But you did break through, and you did get the wherewithal.
Yeah, I mean, it took 8 years to make this film.
Ah.
It took me a year to talk Angela into it. Then I was able to raise a little bit of money, starter money, and then I made a connection with some French producers. The French are not afraid of Angela Davis.
Right.
And was able, with the French producers, to raise about a third of the budget. I could leverage that to come back to the US, and believe it or not, BET Networks, an executive there, a woman, Laretha Jones, said, Shola, you're still raising money for this film? This is 4 years in already.
Yeah,
She goes, I can do this, I can do this. And they put in the rest of the money. So we had our whole budget. We went into production. And then of course, the cost of everything had escalated so much that I was fundraising throughout the whole process.
Wow.
We get to the end, we want to finish the film, the footage, the licensing. Ford Foundation comes back in, Canal Plus, one of our French partners. Still, I sent what I call the Hail Mary email to all those people who were like, oh girl, I could have helped you raise money.
Right.
You needed money? Oh, I could have done that.
Yeah.
3 people responded. I got the nicest rejection letter I've ever gotten in my whole entire life. And 2 people said they could. One woman though, Sidra Smith, said she sent it to some of her celebrity friends. And Jada Pinkett Smith took the call, watched the film, put in the money.
Just like that?
Just like that.
And you didn't know her?
No, but my friend did.
Right.
So, it's one of those things. But what did she want to see? She wanted to see the film. We were almost finished. It was close to picture lock. So your work always speaks for itself. Right. I didn't meet her. I couldn't give her the song and dance and throw on the charm. It was she pressed play, and either she liked it or she didn't.
She didn't. Yeah. One of the things that you stunned me there, you said it took 8 years?
8 years. My husband has never known me not working on this. In fact, we met when I was just starting this project, starting to send my letters to Angela. My children, 5 and 4, Julian and Violet, have never known me not working on this project. In fact, it's so weird for them because they think Angela is this person whose picture they see, whose voice they hear in the house.
Yeah.
And they're not quite sure what her, so they'll ask me every now, is Angela nice? Is she our friend? And I'm like, I'm a journalist slash documentary filmmaker. What am I going to say? She's nice.
But if it takes that long, in your lifetime of filmmaking, you can't do that many film projects.
Well, I'll tell you this, though. Earl, if I may call you Earl.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
My
Earl.
students call me Professor.
Professor?
But you call me Earl.
Okay, Earl. People go 8 years, what were you doing? Well, I made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feature documentaries in that time, too.
Okay.
3 nonprofit docs.
Right.
And 2 other projects that I worked on but never got off the ground. So you're constantly working the freelance life.
Right.
You're raising money to get into production, to be full-time on a project. But it's that juggling, the balancing act of juggling all this.
What is your pitch to people who have money to get them to give you a nice heft amount?
Each pitch is different, depends on the person. I've had the craziest meetings about this. So I met with one executive, and I gave him it's a political crime drama with a love story at the center, that it really is a narrative. It has that narrative form, and I compare it to various documentaries like that and various films like that. Right. And he listens to my whole pitch, and I'm, right here the whole time, right?
Yeah.
And he leans back and he goes, so let me understand this. You're only interviewing senior citizens? Yeah. So if you see Angela Davis only as a senior citizen, and not as an activist, not as a powerful person, not as a woman of agency, not as, then oh my goodness, I can't help you. Yeah. And then one other executive said to me, okay, the doc, you do whatever you want to do, I might help you raise money for the documentary so that I can make the Hollywood movie. But you have to tell me who the male characters are, the main ones, because there's no woman that can be the lead of my movie.
Ooh.
Women don't sell.
Ooh.
Therefore, I work on other projects and I make independent films.
Yeah. What did you learn from this film? I'm sure you learned a lot from the Shirley Chisholm film, but have you reached that point where you look at it and say, geez, I wish I could have done this, or maybe I would do that?
Well, this film was really hard to make because it's about a particular period in history where, and you remember this?
Yes, of course.
Where somebody from your generation might say, the revolution is around the corner. Well, that sounds funny. I mean, how do you not laugh at that? So part of what I needed to do is put it in the context of the emergency, that sense of like the revolution really is around the corner, that urgency and that sense of violence and all of that. How do I create that world so that somebody who's never experienced it feels like they're going through it with the story,
right.
And then somebody like Angela who has experienced it, who has emotional memories from that period, how does the film feel real, like they're being taken back to that moment in time? So, and I take a term from journalism, narrative, nonfiction. Narrative. Not facts, blah, 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 boring, boring, boring.
Right.
Narrative, nonfiction.
But are you writing out a story before you ever?
Absolutely. I think of it as a story. My dad's from the West Indies, and a lot of his friends were West African. You have the sense of the griot. You don't come over to somebody's house and give them facts. You tell them the story.
Your father is a famous educator too.
Yes, he a professor of history. He was at Columbia University for a very long time. I mean, from '69 to the '80s. He's now a professor emeritus, as he likes to.
He's going to see this film now.
Yeah. He doesn't get on the internet. I got him on that. But yes, he's a history professor, so I was surrounded by books, history books all the time, but somehow I didn't really understand and learn American history. He's West Indian, so he's just like, the West Indians, they're just better, smarter, You Afros, he'd say, what's your problem, man? But it's a different experience, and so I don't know if I learned Black history in a true way that made me feel pride. And we have a lot to be proud of. And we are active agents in all of American history. And so I like to mine the stories where we can see our strength and our agency. And I like to do it around stories about women because we're the lowest folks on the totem pole. People forget about us all the time. And we're fascinating.
I'm sure that your experiences right there, what you're speaking of, is what got you to break into, to pursue film. But before we get to that, I'm fascinated. One of the first things, and I thought I knew you, and then one day I'm reading the New York Times newspaper, and there is this story, and it talks about this young woman who was this fabulous big league track runner. Her name was Shola Lynch. I'm saying, oh my goodness. So how does that fact figure in?
That my former life, you mean? That's
yes.
I would say, how does that figure in? It figures in, the one thing about athletics is you learn how to set goals and you learn how, like for instance, you cannot train for the Olympics in 2 weeks.
Right.
There's no cramming in athletics.
Yes.
You've got to work on something daily. You've got to have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And you've got to be able to adjust them as things happen. And because you have a bad race, what are you going to do, quit? No, you go back to the trenches, you think it, you rethink it, etc. So I think it gave me a methodology that applies very well to filmmaking. I mean, filmmaking is one of these things where you're going to be told no more than you're going to be told yes. You're going to be rejected more, and if you can't deal with that, it's not the right place for you.
You were a hurdler, right?
No, middle distance, 800 and 1500.
I saw the picture there on the monitor. I thought it was a hurdle.
A hurdle?
Of course, I can't see that far.
Oh, yeah, no.
Middle distance, and you were Very good.
Coming out of high school, I was #1 in the nation in my events, 800 and 1500. I was recruited by everybody. I chose to go to the University of Texas. Lady Longhorn, hook 'em.
Ah!
Hey, hook 'em! Horns in the house! Texas, Texas, yeah!
Well, you were going to school then in New York?
I grew up in New York, and I went to school at Texas.
So when you went down to Texas, that must have been...
Yeah, and everybody in my family was they were like, you know that Texas is not like New York. Whatever that meant, you know? Of course Texas is not like New York. There's tumbleweed. It's the Southwest. So growing up in New York and going to school where I went to school, and my dad being a professor in a very kind of international, intellectual atmosphere. And my mom is Canadian too, so neither of my parents were American. I don't know if I really understood the impact of slavery on American culture. And so I thought I was, in 70s, you know what the #1 album was for us growing up? Free to Be You and Me.
Right.
So I was free to be, Malcolm and Martin had taken care of the race thing, Gloria and the Gals, the gender thing. I could be glorious me, but it doesn't work in the world that way. And I went to Texas and I found that out. And I want to say this, that it wasn't just Texas. It was anywhere I would have gone. But in Texas, I caused problems.
So how does this trail lead you to filmmaking?
I was like, what is this craziness? Like, I didn't understand light skin, good hair, dark skin, house, fields, etc. And I didn't understand so much about American history and its impact on our current daily lives. And all of these things would happen, and so when I figured it out, I was like, this is race? Oh my gosh, I cried for a whole day. Because I grew up thinking we were all, I bought it. That's what they told us in the 70s, and that's what our experiences were. And so perhaps I was a little naive. But when I discovered it, I was really upset. It was like finding out, believing in God and then or believing in Santa Claus, or believing in God, God's better, and finding out that it was all a hoax.
Did you have
So history answered my questions. And then I got mad because reading about it didn't fulfill me in the way that I wanted, so I wanted to curate. I wanted to do multimedia installations.
So did you have to go to film school?
No, I have a master's in American history and public history resource management,
Right.
so I'm a curator.
Right.
And then I wanted to do that in New York City after I finished graduate school and couldn't find a job doing that. And by a little bit of luck and a little bit of perseverance, I landed a job with Ken Burns and Florentine Films, working on a historical doc, because I knew how to research for the writer, I knew how to do visual research, and I knew how to combine it all together.
Wow, so what films did you work on with him?
Frank Lloyd Wright, about the American architect, and
Yeah.
then the 10-part, 20-hour jazz series.
Okay.
Which is about the music, yes, but for me, it was about the history of Black and immigrant America from 1890 to the present, and my job was to find photographic evidence of that.
So in this
It
period...
was awesome!
So you knew then that you were going to break away and do your own...
No. I knew that I was good at research. I knew I would be a very good associate producer and then eventually a producer. But then, I worked for him. That was my film school. Working with Ken Burns and his producers and seeing how films are made in that way. And the great thing about jazz is a young jazz musician. What's the #1 rule for a young jazz musician?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You never copy the masters.
Yeah.
You find your own voice.
Okay.
So I challenged myself to see if I could make a film, because it's easy when you've been in a job for a while to be like, oh, I would have done it. Well, I know what you get too big for your britches. So I challenged myself to make a film, and that's the Chisholm film, Chisholm 72, Unbought and
So
Unbought.
the essential thing then in the filmmaking is to try to be an original.
Find your voice.
Find your voice.
Writers the same way. Do you
Yes.
want to just copy
Yes.
other people's
Yeah.
style?
No,
No,
you
you
have
have to find your own voice. And I think sometimes, especially when we're young, we're in a rush.
What are the other essentials in doing a film, making a film?
Well, I would also say trust your vision. So the Chisholm film was my first film as a director. And we were finished with it, And I have this, it's 70s. Shirley Chisholm runs for president in 1972. You look at the news, the graphics are all like split screen and colors and all that kind of stuff. So I used a lot of that in my opening sequence. And they sent it, PBS had funded it, so it went to the PBS executives. And they watched it, and then I got the notes back. We will never put this crap on. What is this film? What is this film about? The opening, cut the whole opening out and start with Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite, newscaster, says, Shirley Chisholm, a hat. No, a hat. No, a bonnet has been tossed into the presidential ring today. That of Mrs. Shirley Chisholm. Yeah. So you want to start a film about Shirley Chisholm, the black woman who runs for president, by making fun of her or undercutting her? Huh. First shot, wide shot, exterior church. Medium shot, interior church. Third shot, close up, Shirley Chisholm. Lower third, the church, etc. Blah, blah, blah. You know who it is and where it is. And she says, I am Shirley Chisholm and I am running for the presidency of the United States. And then the split screen starts. And after the wacky 70s and Vietnam puts you in the time and the place and the energy of the 70s, then Walter Cronkite.
After you were here, I showed the Shirley Chisholm film to my class. And when the film was over, the students stood up and applauded.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
So it took guts to do that as a first-time director. But I'll also say this, that same cut that I had sent to the PBS executives got the Chisholm 72 film into Sundance.
Yeah. And it won and it later was to win a Peabody Award, too.
And it won a Peabody Award.
Yes.
So sometimes you do have to stick to your guns.
Yes. Who do you... who are the people, the filmmakers that you look at and try to learn something from?
I have so many for so many different reasons. Usually when I'm making a film, I watch certain films over and over again. But documentary filmmakers, Earl Morris is one that I admire greatly. Kevin MacDonald is one. Earl Morris did Thin Blue Line, Fog of War, etc. Kevin MacDonald made One Day in September. And then I have films like Julie Dash's films or Casey Lemon's films that kind of feed me visually. So it's a range of filmmakers depending.
Your other, and you're a part of your life now is also, you're at the Schomburg Library, which is the preeminent repository of Black American history. But you were in charge of the film archives, right?
Yes, this happened very recently. So now I am the curator for the Moving Image and Recorded Sound Archive there at the Schomburg. And so, when I started out after graduate school, I wanted to be a curator. I couldn't find a job curating. I had to spend 17 years making films to be offered the job that I wanted in the first place.
That's the way it happens, though. That's life.
But it is, because if you think about it, the same skills apply. And so now I feel like my job is not just for a story, but for the whole history of African Americans on film, whether it's archival or whether it's in film, to collect the evidence of us, so that when we're studying a certain period, whether it's the Black Panthers, whether it's Flappers, whether it's World War I soldiers returning home, Harlem's Hellfighters, that you'd be able to click and see us. We existed. We exist now, and we existed in every period. So as smart as you all are, as cute as you all are, as energetic as you all are, try and imagine what you would have been like in a different historical period. You wouldn't have been any less smart, but the circumstances would have been different. How would you have reacted? What choices would you have made? And so if we think of history as philosophy, we can reclaim our legacy.
I hear it said a lot, particularly comes out of Hollywood, that the filmmaker that wants to tell a story about the Black American, no matter what that story may be, they don't want it. Do you find a resistance? Is there a resistance in Hollywood that will shape what you want to do?
Always. You know, I mean, there's nothing, no matter what you look like, this business is not easy. And money people are not necessarily creative people. They want to make their dollars back. And so part of your creativity has to be the business.
Right.
You have to be able to talk their language and make them feel comfortable with the business model that surrounds your work also.
What about internet and TV? Is that fertile ground there?
It completely is. So, you know, right now, Free Angela was in, we premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival last year in 2012. We were bought by Code Black and Lionsgate. We were in theaters in April.
Yes.
And, you know, but to give you a comparison, so we opened in theaters the second week in April, I think. The week before, we opened in France. You know, we just finished our theatrical run in France.
That must have been something. You were there.
Yes.
That must have been quite something.
That's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. We were close to 1 month here in the U.S.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know,
but we were in theaters,
yeah,
and we did okay. We grossed over $100,000. It's not $100 million, but you know. And now we're in, you know, on DVD and digital download, and we're in the Oscar conversation.
I'm listening to you talking about in Toronto. You're in Paris, and you're doing
Jet
all these
set.
things, and you have another job over here, a big job. How do you balance off all these things? By the way, when you came down here in 2009, you almost didn't come because you were very pregnant.
Yeah, well, you know, Angela said something in the film that is so, it just resonates with me so much. She said about the politics, her politics. You know, this is not something we just did, this is the way we lived our life. When you are passionate about your work, it's the way you live your life. So I would be a miserable person if I put off getting married and having kids. If I was like, oh, I have to do that after this, after I'm done working. You know, you have to find a way to integrate life and work, and that is really important. So yeah, I'll come and talk to you pregnant.
But to balance all that, it must be a pretty tricky thing to do.
It must be. Well, it depends how you think about it. You know,
I know you have a lot of magic, but
life is for living.
Yes.
You don't get do-overs.
Yeah.
You know? And so certain opportunities come up, you have to take advantage of them. And so you find a way. You know, and my children, what I tell them is a happy mommy is a nicer mommy. Which, by the way, I repeat to my husband as well.
Old enough to know? Are they old enough to know and understand what you do?
Yes. So they know mommy's a filmmaker, and when the film came out, you know, you showed the trailer, they watched it over and over again, especially my daughter. And she had favorite parts. She was, you know, she loved seeing Angela Davis's mom. She'd go, that's her mom. And then when Angela Davis came on and said, genocide, this is genocide, she'd go, that's my favorite part. I'm like, go girl, go. You know, and then the other day, you know, little kids and hair and all of that stuff, and sometimes she's like, I want to have straight hair, and I'm like, you have glorious hair. The other day, she came out, she had teased all her hair out. She was like, Angela Davis hair. And she was like, you could tell she just looked beautiful because she could name it.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
That's important.
Yes. Now, your husband, he also has a demanding career too.
Yes. He worked for a commercial bank for a while. He was vice president of community development, wanted to make the world a better place through loans and banking. And then he decided he wanted to run for office. Yeah. And so most recently he ran for city council. And we ran a very good campaign. We fell a little short, but next time.
Of course.
Yeah. So we call ourselves tag team wrestlers. You know what I mean? One of us is in there with the kids, and one of us is out. And then you tag the other one in and out. And then we make sure to have...
That's where my parents were. My father used to say, we never leave the kids alone. If one was there, the other was coming.
Exactly.
We have a surprise for you. Speaking of, you're talking about your daughter as a little kid. Look at this piece of footage.
Now, Kermit the Frog is next to Shola.
I know that.
Ooh, yes, thank you. That's lovely. And then now, if I go back here, Black. I am next to Fanny. Right?
To me.
And now, I am next to Shola.
That's you on Sesame Street. How old were you there?
I was on Sesame Street at between the ages of 2.5 and 6. I was potty trained really early.
Oh my!
That was the only prerequisite. That and being talkative.
But
it's not acting, by the way. You know that.
What do you mean?
So they would get kids who like to interact, and so it was.
So they're just shooting footage?
Exactly. They'd say, okay, you're going to be with Kermit the Frog, and they'd put you there, and Fanny was there, and then you never knew what Kermit was going to say, so you were listening and playing. It was like play. They just shot it, and you were exactly who you were.
But you were very much aware of the camera there.
Not really. Yes and no. Like you knew you were on a set, but you were still. Once Kermit came in, it was.
So as a newspaper man, I can't say that she started it was on Sesame Street. That drew her to film way back then.
No.
She knew she was going to be a filmmaker.
No.
Oh. Well.
No.
Well, okay, let's talk about this. What other kind of film are you interested in making now? Or do you already have something in mind?
I do. I have a next project. And first of all, I've been selected by Sundance to be one of 6 filmmakers as part of their mid-career women's filmmaking initiative. They're like, women filmmakers are fantastic, but they drop off mid-career. And so the next story I want to tell is a narrative. So it's not a documentary, it's a movie. And I want to reimagine Harriet Tubman as an action heroine. Not in an exaggerated, pulpy way, but imagine what she was able to do, the power she had to see herself as whole in the midst of the terror of slavery, psychological, emotional, physical terror of slavery, and to be able to commandeer herself away, that's the action, and to return and rescue through the Underground Railroad more people. She was a freedom fighter.
Yes.
And she would take your low expectations of her and turn them around. So in other words, black women were not considered to be dangerous, especially not elderly black women. So often she would disguise herself.
Yeah.
But watch out, she also packed a pistol.
But now you're going to have to be a formidable fundraiser to do that.
Sure.
You can do it. You said the women drop out at a certain point in their career?
Well, I mean, it does get difficult when you get married and have kids and raising the money and all of that.
But isn't the most difficult time when the kids are tiny?
Little. Sustainability is always a big issue. So some people get into commercials if they can, but I love the archival aspect. I love the historical aspect. I love telling true stories. And bringing new audiences to art history. So this position at the Schomburg was like a gift because it keeps me in my business, and they want me to keep making films. So it's like an academic position. You all write books, I'll make films.
Fantastic.
It might take 5 to 8 years, but I can at least eat in between.
Well, you see, when you said that first time, I'm thinking like, Drew, you're doing, but it's not just that. You're doing things.
Absolutely. And so this is easier. I have one place to go to.
When you're doing a film, is that the height of satisfaction for you?
It's very, for instance, this Angela Davis film, we were in production. It was very intense because I felt like we didn't have enough time, we didn't have enough money. And then when we were in the editing room putting things together, so I script and we piece it together and all of that, it wasn't gelling. It was just not good for a long time. And I would come home and I'd be like, honey, don't talk to me. I don't know if I can pull this off. And it was months into the process, and we finally figured it out. I was working with a French editor, Mariam Monnier, and I brought the copy of the film home, and I was like, Vince, watch this. Vince is my husband. Watch this. And I went in the other room, pacing, writing, and I hear the ending music, and I walk out there. He's crying.
Oh, wow.
He was like, wow. I am so proud of you. You did it.
Oh, wow.
I can see it. I mean, it wasn't the finished product. It was still too long, blah, 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 blah. But he had lived it with me.
Yeah.
No, I know.
We have some students here that are chomping at the bit to ask their questions, and so let's, can we go to them? Is a microphone set there? Yes, first one up.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Milani Mitchell. I am from Atlanta, Georgia. I am a freshman here at Hampton University, and my major is strategic communications. I just want to first start off by saying you have a fearless, brave heart. I just commend you on everything that you're doing for us in our community. And from my K through 12 experience, I didn't get the images of me or the images of black people that looked like me, that sound like me, that dressed like me, that came from inner city schools, that, you know, were fighting long and hard to take back a legacy. And when I reached Hampton University, I started my Jack 101 class and my history courses. I began to learn about myself. I began to research about different activists, and like you were saying when you started researching, you cried for days or you became angry and furious about, why didn't you already know this? Why didn't you know that our legacy has so much to do with our present day? And I just want to know, how do you keep that fearless heart? How do you say when you go meet these executives, no, we're going to do it exactly how I pictured it. We're going to do it exactly how our legacy was. We're not going to change anything, because when you're watching these films and you're watching these stories, it's empowering, it's moving. And for you to be able to sit there and say, we are going to tell it like this because we are powerful and this is our creative minds. How do you keep that? And how do you keep that positive image for yourself and for your films?
Whoa. Thank you first. And let me see if I can answer part of that question. Well, you know, we can't go to the mat on everything. We have to pick the things in our life we want to go to the mat on. And the Chisholm film, I needed to find out if I was a director, and I needed to be able to succeed or fail on my own terms. So if I had pulled that with the executives and it didn't get into Sundance and it didn't do well and it didn't win any awards, I probably wouldn't have made another film. But it was my challenge to myself. Right. And rather than, I wanted to see how, you know, I just had to see it through on my own terms. And I think I get that from athletics. Okay. Yeah. And the Angela Davis film too, it's like you work on something for so long that you have to like it because you will be criticized. I mean, you make something, and we all do it. What do you do when you watch TV? Oh yeah, that was a bad joke. Oh, that sucked. You go to the movies, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Do you see that actor, da, 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 da. Well, there are people who are working hard to make those crappy performances happen. And it takes just as much to make a bad film as it does to make a good film, and nobody sets out to make a bad film, you know, or write a bad book. Right. And so I to be prepared for that fallout, for creative work, I have to like what I put my name on. I never put my name on something if it's half-baked.
By the way, just really quick, in the Shirley Chisholm film,
yes,
at the very end, when she's sitting there, and I think she was crying, was the woman next to her Angela Davis?
No.
I bet somebody that was Angela.
No, it was a woman named Sandra Gaines.
Have a lot of people asked you if that was Angela?
No, but you do every time I see you.
Oh, I asked you. Do we have another question? Do we have a question?
Redirect.
Question. Yes.
Hi, my name is Crystalline Solomon. I'm a junior public relations major from Alexandria, Virginia. And my question to you is, after seeing the film, I fell in love all over again with Angela Davis, but I never knew how much of an icon she was on a global scale. And I just known her as an American icon. So what was it about her, in your opinion, that brought her to the world stage, that made people want to rally behind her cause?
Yeah, you know, the very thing that got her into trouble, I mean, I think it was because she was a militant radical, not a militant radical,
right,
black radical.
Right.
But it was also because she was a communist.
Yes.
And that was the very thing that got her into trouble. But it was the very thing that also saved her because there were communist parties all over the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And what they did is they all started free Angela movements just based on that. And then when they learned about the trial, they felt like she should have a fair trial. And so it just blossoms.
Was she an easy person to work with in making the film?
Well, thankfully, we did not work together in making the film. I mean, what I request is,
I see. Okay.
yeah, Angela, I would like to make a film about you.
Right.
Will you participate in it?
Right, right.
Okay, and then, yes. Sometimes people want to be involved in the filmmaking. She thankfully did not, so she allowed, and I think that was because she's a professor.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of like, let the young person go off and do their work. But she did ask to see the film once before I finished it, and I did. I showed it to her. I took the film in a VCR or DVD player out to Oakland. We met. It was just the two of us. And it had been years since I talked to her. I mean, I talked to her regularly, but since we'd really seen each other, she hadn't seen any of the work. Press play, and her foot started wagging from the first shot. I was like, oh, and I positioned myself just behind her so that I could watch her. And she said, oh, I didn't know you did that, recreations. And she sat forward a few times. She teared up twice. Oh. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience because it's her life.
Yes, yeah.
And it was not easy.
Yes,
that part
absolutely,
of it,
absolutely.
And the choices that she had to make under the amount of pressure that she was under. I don't know very many 26-year-olds who would have been so brave in a way.
Yeah. It's amazing that she was that young. We have another question.
Hi, my name is Brenton Honeywell. I'm a junior broadcast journalism major from Tampa, Florida. And my question is, I heard you talk about working with Ken Burns in Florentine Films. And even though you said like the number one thing in filmmaking is originality, was there anything that you did, however, come away with from working with him?
Absolutely. I learned how what did I learn? He was a really good fundraiser, and he is good at talking to people. So I definitely got to see that in action. I also learned that you can't rush the process, that there is a process, and he would often say, trust the process, trust the process. I also learned in retrospect, I didn't feel pressure while I worked there, although we had the expectations were very high for every one of us, but there was so much pressure on his shoulders that I didn't understand until I was a director.
Yeah, right.
Everybody else is like, oh yeah, this is my job.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is my film and I'm responsible and oh my gosh. Yeah. And I would also say that he has a very strong vision of the world that he communicates to everybody he works with. And so that is how Ken Burns films are made. And I think it's important to see somebody with that strong a vision, whether you agree with it exactly or not. My world is not slow pans and violins,
right.
But to see the example of that kind of vision, it helped me, I emulated that as a director.
What was it to make him such an effective fundraiser?
I think it's partially the way he sees the world and the topics that he chooses, that they're considered general and popular. I mean, he never thought he would be as successful financially as he's become. I mean, he lived a very modest life and made several films. My favorite films of his are the early ones. He did one on Statue of Liberty. James Baldwin is in there. He's awesome. Oh my God. He did one on the Brooklyn Bridge, Huey Long, these early films which are short. And then every time you take a new job or a new project, make sure that you are learning something new on it so that you advance yourself. You're adding a skill or you're adding something to your resume so you don't get caught in the cog of just doing the same thing over and over again. Think about how you want to advance. Also, be brave enough to make goals. In 5 years, this is where I want to be. And then when you find out you've been totally unrealistic, reevaluate. It's okay to reevaluate.
You said that Ken Burns,
yes.
You mentioned starting film, he seems like he picked nicey subjects to get started, where you jumped right into the deep water. I mean, there had to be a strong reason why Shirley Chisholm's film wasn't made before.
Well, for one, it's a lot harder to make a film when the subject is still alive because you have to deal with their perception of their life.
Right.
And it's a lot not a lot easier, but it's a very different process when it's filtered through somebody else who's done the research. So in other words, a lot of documentaries are based on books. So a journalist or somebody else has done the research and you kind of follow that lead. The Chisholm film is original research.
Oh?
Yeah, nobody had written on her run for president. This
It's
Angela
amazing.
Davis film, and I'm going to do a book, I have to, is original research. There's so much more details and nuance to the story to add but it's original research.
Right.
And I do this because those things don't exist.
A final question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Claypool. I'm a broadcast journalism major, marketing minor. I also wanted to say congratulations. I was able to watch the premiere in Toronto as an intern, so I was able to see it from the beginning, and congratulations on the Oscar buzz. But my question is, as an up-and-coming filmmaker, do you suggest film school? I didn't hear you mention it, so do you feel that film school is, should we use it?
You have an answer there?
Okay, right, this is television.
Yes.
It's live, yeah. I think that film school is valuable if you are sure that's what you want to do. I think learning on the job is really helpful and instructive and something to do. So if you go back to film school, you're really directed. You know exactly where you want to fit, what you want to learn. I think that the thing about a film is there's the technical aspects, right? And what role you want to play on the crew, whether you're the DP or the director or whatever. But also part of it is having something to say. And that takes living, that takes failing, that takes making mistakes, that takes engaging, that takes getting sad, angry, all of that stuff, and engaging with the world around you. I mean, having something to say is the most important part of filmmaking.
So the young filmmaker has to be very careful about what you're choosing to start with, because the more complicated things, you don't have that experience.
Well, you have to be careful because it becomes your calling card. I had a friend who wanted desperately to make the big feature narrative, made the big feature narrative, and rushed. Not the right project, not the right money, etc. And made it, but can't make another one.
Right.
So this is the thing. If you're going to take the time to engage in this kind of creative work and put your name on it as a director or as that it's got to be yours. You've got to feel comfortable that this is your vision, so that you know whether it succeeds or fails. That you're good at this and you got to move on to that.
You gave us a tip on your third film coming.
Yes.
This should be 3 films, 3 stories of
my trilogy, and then I can move on.
But okay, so I was just going to say, do you intend to stay telling black stories?
Every time I finish a film, like when I finished the Chisholm film, I said the only thing I know is I'm not going to make another film about a black woman. I am not going to be pigeonholed. Great, and then. Angela Davis' name kept coming up. I kept seeing her image in certain places, and I started, well, let me just see, this might work, and the story called me, and it was easier for me to do it than to ignore it.
Right.
And the same with this Harriet Tubman. I mean, I remember we were in the middle of making Free Angela, and the DP for the recreations, the director of photography, is Bradford Young. He is a wonderful up-and-coming black cinematographer. And he was like, so what's next, Shola? I was like, can we do this first? Please? He goes, come on. And I told him, he was like, oh, I'm in.
Well, this third film that you're talking about, is that your dream film, would you say? Or is the dream film something else? You're not gonna let us know.
Each film is the dream film.
Okay.
And then you accomplish it and you dream a little bigger.
I got it.
But I try, like each film is, like the Chisholm film was my first as a director, and I wanted to tell this story and do it without narration, and I wanted to feel like it had narrative quality, this narrative nonfiction idea. Did that, and it got into Sundance, and it won a Peabody. So then the Angela Davis film, I said, this is a political crime drama with a love story at the center. Definitely no narration there. I want the music to be a character, and it is. Yes. Vernon Reid did the music with the guitarist.
Yes.
And I want it to have, it needed to have recreations. And recreations, so I created images from scratch, the images I wish I could find that didn't exist when Angela's on the run. And I said, everybody who was working with me on this, that if they suck, I'm going to cut them out, just know that. They said, okay. And it was Issa Davis, Angela's niece, who is an actress and a playwright, Pulitzer finalist playwright, and a singer and a songwriter, and Bradford Young, and 3 of us and our crew. And they turned out beautifully. And I think they help elevate the story. So check. Now I want to control all the images.
I'm curious about something. What is the...
My husband tells me all the time, Shola, you can't direct everything all the time. But I try. I know.
In other words, you have to stop directing it. But
Yeah.
What is the most essential thing that a director has to have?
Thick skin, vision, perseverance.
When you say thick skin, you mean because...
Yeah, because people are always telling you your ideas are crap, or you can't do that, or who wants to see that, there's no audience for that, and somehow you have to... It's like being an entrepreneur. It's the same as being an entrepreneur.
Right.
You have to say, okay, yeah, they might be right about this, so let me amend this, but on the bigger picture, it's gotta be X, Y, and Z. You have to stick to your guns.
I wish we had more time, but you know, we're TV now. Clock keeps running. But what time we have left, I'm going to give it to you. It's about a minute, and you can tell our students anything you want. We may cut it. No kidding. What do you want to leave them with?
What do I want to leave them with? I guess, particularly for the women. Sorry, fellas, you guys get a lot of advice. But I think that often we are, and this is the thing that sports actually also taught me, is we try to be perfect too much. And perfect is not excellent. If you're perfect, you're working below your capacity to keep it smooth and easy. Excellent is going for it. It's making mistakes. It's learning from those mistakes. It's raising the bar. And so, screw perfect, be excellent.
Now I'm going to tell you.
Am I allowed to say that?
No. You said.
You know what I wanted to say.
I appreciate everything that you said, but I'm sitting there listening to you, and I'm saying the only thing's wrong with this picture here tonight is Caldwell. You didn't need to be here. Shola could carry that ball by herself, but then she has the sports background. Listen, it is just wonderful having you here.
Thank you for bringing me.
I love Shola. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.